Seychelles is a picturesque island nation in the Indian Ocean, and in the late 2000s, it faced a dire financial crisis. Crippled by the economic crash of 2008 and the instability that followed, the challenges in Seychelles were daunting. It was during these times that an innovative idea took root, a debt conversion plan that would help stabilize the nation's economy and spearhead a global revolution in ocean conservation. When the global economic crash struck Seychelles, the nation was already grappling with a complex web of financial challenges, including balance of payment issues and a foreign exchange crisis. Tourism, Seychelles' economy was thriving, yet this success was offset by the burden of repaying mounting commercial debt with high interest rates. The country was at an impasse. Debt restructuring was a new lifeline in an ocean of economic turbulence. Given its small economy, Seychelles' efforts for obtaining favorable conditions for financial aid seemed to be out of reach. This small island nation refused to be left behind, so it devised a unique, ambitious plan. Boasting 1.35 million square kilometers of ocean, Seychelles pledged to protect 30% of its marine space as a condition of a debt restructuring agreement, a proposition which at the time had never been done before. Join us as we explore the remarkable story of how Seychelles, known for its leadership in conservation and sustainable development, turned the tide to become a global leader in innovative financing and the blue economy.
I think we need to go back to that particular period. So 2010, maybe even a little bit further back, 2008, when the financial crisis hit. And Seychelles was really hit very hard. Seychelles had a lot of economic structural problems at the time, balance of payments issues, a huge foreign exchange crisis. And this came to a head with the financial and banking crisis of 2008, where essentially Seychelles could not repay its debt and went into a restructuring with the IMF, which was done very successfully, by the way. But what we saw in 2008, a small island developing country, very much buffeted by the turbulence of the international economy. The situation was, I think, quite specific in the sense that there were parts of the economy that were doing extremely well, such as tourism, but there was a huge structural financial challenge because while tourism was doing well, the foreign exchange earnings were counterbalanced by the large amount that we were paying in servicing debt. And a lot of this debt was commercial and had been taken at a point when Seychelles had limited access to concessional finance and was often borrowing at very high rates on the international market. And of course, there were mistakes that were made in accumulating that debt, but also it was a scenario where there were limited options.
When we saw that because of the unsustainability of our debt, a debt crisis, we were in arrears of almost $300 million. So at that time, we felt that we were not able to repay our debt, and we felt that the whole macroeconomic condition of Seychelles was not feasible as well to face the financial crisis that was happening in the world. We feel that as a small island state economy and a developing state as well, there's a significant number of challenges because you have a lot of infrastructure that you want to do, but at the same time, you have a limit for the amount that you can borrow. And as well, the pressure on Seychelles is because we are high income per capita, and we are not able to tap on significant, maybe lower cost borrowing. So Seychelles, we face with a number of significant, maybe externalities that affect us on our borrowing capacity.
We don't have necessarily an influence. We don't have huge financial resources. When we go into international negotiations, there's always a risk that we will be irrelevant. But what makes us relevant is that while we are a small island state, we have 1.3 million square kilometers of ocean. And that had huge geopolitical value, huge economic value, and it was a question of how we position ourselves in that context.
In 2008, as we know, 2008, there was the global financial and economic crisis. And I think as every Seychelles knows, Seychelles, we were doing quite badly at the time. And in 2010, I was at a meeting of the Global Island Partnership in Washington, D.C. I was the chair of the steering committee. And a representative of the Nature Conservancy, TNC, who was at the meeting during a break for coffee, quietly turned to me and just popped the question, Ambassador, would Seychelles be interested in a debt swap? I knew, having been a former Minister of the Environment, I knew what debt swaps were. And I knew that they were, and still are to a certain extent, controversial. And one of the reasons for debt swaps being controversial in the past was sometimes when they work, the money that comes in from the debt swap is diverted by governments, ministries of finance, governments, to other uses other than what the debt swap was done for. So I asked him, I said, why are you asking this question? He says, well, Seychelles has a problem with paying its debt because of the crisis. And you have a large ocean space, so maybe one of the things you should consider is a debt swap. Well, I said, what's different about this one? He said, it's the ocean.
Most of the financing that was coming for protected areas was either government national budget, annual budget that we had, and that was very limited funds, and there was very little you could do with it. And then there was, of course, the Global Environment Facility funding that we got every 6 years or every 5 years cycle, and a few little bits and pieces of financing that we got. But there was no big substantial financing coming in for protected areas and biodiversity.
So it was natural for us, as in terms of our foreign policy, to differentiate ourselves. But we wanted to not just be responding and reacting, we wanted to lead. And on the blue economy, that was where we could lead. And where we really emphasized that small island developing states such as Seychelles will not simply be accepting to just follow, but if we don't do something for ourselves, the likelihood is we will be left behind. And unfortunately, it is precisely a country like Seychelles would have found it very difficult to raise these additional resources.
The Nature Conservancy proposed the debt conversion really because we were invited by the Seychelles government to help them think about long-term management of their oceans and perhaps improving the protected area footprint. When we got started, the Seychelles government had less than 0.5% of their ocean protected. And the Seychelles government was committed to trying to increase that to 30%. And so the Nature Conservancy looked at their sovereign debt and realized that actually there might be a way to restructure or convert some of their sovereign debt, some of their finance that was coming due, and refinance it and then create a revenue stream to flow into conservation, into long-term management of their oceans, which is critical for the Seychelles. The Seychelles has a blue economy. Their economy is based on fisheries, on tuna, and on tourism. And so we thought that the debt conversion was a great way for them to achieve economic stability and long-term climate and conservation durability.
How do you create a long-term form of finance that every year is generating resources that can be reinvested in those goals that you have? And that's where the old idea of a debt swap became a new idea around oceans. The old idea of a debt swap where you protect a piece of forest and in return you can reduce your debt. But then looking at it in the practicalities of a country like Seychelles, which had done debt restructuring by necessity because of the financial crisis, but now was looking to get new resources to invest in marine protected areas and to invest in the blue economy, in this idea that the ocean should be a development space and not just an extractive space. And I think, to this day, I think that's quite revolutionary.
Basically, what you were trying to do was to take debt and make it work for you, and to bring that debt in the form of funds that could be used for biodiversity. So in itself, that was the most innovative part of it. And Seychelles made a pledge, a commitment, that Seychelles was prepared to set aside 30% of its EEZ. So when that pledge was made, basically it got the ball rolling, and Seychelles started discussing with TNC, the Nature Conservancy, about doing a debt swap. And of course, this was very new to us, but TNC had the experience of doing debt swaps, so they advised us about how to go about it.
Back in 2008, when the country started to work on the debt conversion, it was trying to find innovative ways through discussions with TNC on how it could best proceed with the debt conversion. And since TNC is a non-governmental organization that is based in the States, they could not do the debt conversion transaction directly with government. And so therefore, they needed to put in place an independent structure that will allow Seychelles to get the debt conversion done, and at the same time help government to restructure its debt. And so therefore, they created SeyCCAT, and that has allowed for government to do that. So in other words, we are an intermediary that allows for the transactions to happen between TNC through SeyCCAT and then onwards to government. The SeyCCAT is short for the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust. We were established back in 2015. Operations came into place in 2016, and our main aim is to provide resources on the ground to support projects or programs that are related to ocean conservation, also climate change adaptation and mitigation, as well as to help the development of a sustainable blue economy for the Seychelles.
SeyCCAT started off as a document. It was a document which needed to be implemented. So the first recruitment was a chief executive officer at the time, who was a British citizen with the expertise of setting up trust funds. So that is how the trust got started. And in fact, we have a full Seychelles team today who is running the trust. I think we are just below 10 staff. And there has been a huge change in capacity. There has been a change in how business is being conducted. We have an institution that knows exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So SeyCCAT has come a long way.
I would say that the future of SeyCCAT is bright, because SeyCCAT is now a brand that has the potential to expand beyond the MSP and also beyond the debt swap. It has been a unique vehicle for mobilizing resources and for assisting with development of the Seychelles blue economy. It has the potential to grow into a well-respected financial institution and act as a sort of permanent bridge between donors and implementers on the ground in the country. SeyCCAT also has a long-term financial stream, which, although small, can form a solid foundation for long-term partnerships in conservation in the country. So I would say that the SeyCCAT itself and the way it is established up till now, it can actually help us a lot in our efforts and become that anchor around which we develop marine conservation and also the blue economy in Seychelles.
The Seychelles debt restructuring will provide financing for the implementation of the Marine Spatial Plan, The Marine Spatial Plan itself is a necessary output of this debt restructuring, with the set milestones written and conditional in the loan agreement. So there was a requirement to meet the different milestones of the Marine Spatial Plan, the targets for conservation, targets for completion of the plan, and finally, implementation of the plan itself.
The Seychelles Marine Spatial Plan is very integral in the work of the Trust. It was one of the very commitments that the Seychelles Government made with TNC in order for them to do the impact investment for the debt conversion. And that includes the designation of the 30% of our exclusive economic zone as marine protection areas, but more so for the overall management of the 100% of the Seychelles EEZ.
The Seychelles Marine Spatial Plan is a government-led participatory public process for looking at the uses in the ocean of the Seychelles with three main objectives. One of them is a biodiversity conservation goal of 30% marine protections. We also have a climate change adaptation goal and pushing forward the blue economy strategy and roadmap of the Seychelles. And we're basically planning to maximize the effective and sustainable use of our ocean and to support our blue economy.
One of the critical roles of SeyCCAT is to ensure that there is the necessary enabling structures and to support the government of Seychelles in raising the necessary resources in order to do the zoning for the MSP, but at the same time to fund the implementation of the Marine Spatial Plan.
Up till now, it has been quite a lengthy exercise for the country, but it has been a very useful exercise, and it has helped us to establish a firm foundation for managing the marine environment. Right now, we are working on setting up the interim governance mechanism through the Environment Protection Act, and we hope that very soon we'll be able to transition to the permanent coordination mechanism for that plan. We are now looking at co-management agreements with all our partners who are participating in implementing certain components of the MSP. Management plans are being developed with partners, and we hope that very soon we'll be able to pilot those management plans, especially in the outer islands of Seychelles.
The Seychelles has adopted the definition of marine spatial planning from the IOC UNESCO guide or definition. And it's basically a public process where we're analyzing the allocation and distribution of uses in a marine area. And we would do that to achieve not only an ecological objective, but also social and cultural and economic objectives. First one, which is most widely reported upon so far, is the 30% biodiversity conservation goal. This is a 30% conservation goal not only by area, so 30% of our EZ is 400,000 square kilometers. The second goal is to push forward the blue economy strategy of the Seychelles, so you're maximizing the economic opportunities in a sustainable manner in our EEZ. And then the third goal is a climate change adaptation goal. The marine spatial planning is specified through a political process. So for example, for the Seychelles, it's led by the government of Seychelles.
Seychelles is a pioneer in this field, and this is incredible. You know, to make a legally binding commitment for a marine spatial plan, as opposed to what most MSP is a policy, or it may just be a presidential commitment. Here, Seychelles in the MSP and through the debt conversion is saying, we have so much confidence in this and our ability to do this that we are making it legally binding. Compared to other marine spatial plan processes, what's also different about Seychelles is that this is also the first small island developing state, or what often is said, a large ocean state. You know, this is a country that has a 450 kilometer squared landmass and 1.35 million square kilometers in oceans. So this is a country at the time which had less than 100,000 people. There are more than 100,000 people here now. And it's a country that has more than 12 marine sectors. This is complicated.
It involves many stakeholders because when you look at whatever space you use, if it's terrestrial, there's always conflicts between a number of different partners and stakeholders that have got a stake in using land, and you need to involve all of them. And the same thing happens at sea. It might not be obvious to most of us because we tend to be terrestrial creatures, but at sea there are the same kind of conflicts that happens because you have a number of stakeholders. You have the maritime transportation, tourism activities that are happening, especially when it comes to the inshore areas. You have infrastructure being built, you have ports, you might have renewable energy being looked at, aquaculture, fisheries. And fisheries, it's a lot of different types of fisheries that happens. So you have to look at that. You might have desalination, you might have disposal of treated wastewater and all these different activities that you need to take into consideration. And you need to talk to all these partners and get them on board.
It's been a process that is very inclusive, involving stakeholders from different sectors, each with their own interests. So our engagement, active engagement in the process to ensure that we defend the right of the fishing community. But while we're looking at conservation and sustainable management, we also have to ensure that the fishers that get their livelihood from fishing operation, they continue to survive.
Since it is an ecosystem-based management tool, it gives a way for companies to ensure that they are using the area, but at the same time, ensuring that it is done in a way that the environment is not affected by what we are doing. So it puts different steps that companies need to follow to be able to operate in the set zone. So all the zones have the different goals that are needed to ensure that the ecosystem is not adversely damaged by the activity being done. And it also ensures that there are minimum conflict because it is an open process and all of the stakeholders know what is being done in that zone.
The MSP is a major commitment for the country because it encompasses a lot of the commitments of Seychelles vis-à-vis all the various undertakings in international forum like the CBD and under the climate conventions. So for us, it is something that is very significant and that would involve everyone in the country. And it's important that people are aware of its existence, but they're also aware of the details of the MSP because eventually their activities would also be affected and they would have to abide to some of the rules that are being proposed for the various zones in the MSP. It's very important that people are aware of the details of the MSP. It's very important that they engage with the process of preparation of the MSP and that their views are captured so that eventually we have something that satisfies everyone.
With respect to Seychelles' economy, the fisheries sector is second only to tourism in its contribution to the GDP, employing 17% of the population. In 2018, there was a 116% increase in the total export of fresh and frozen fish, including 400 tons of demersal fish caught monthly. The Seychelles Blue Economy Roadmap recognizes the need for improved governance and management of the fisheries sector, To support this transition, the World Bank helped the government of Seychelles issue the world's first sovereign blue bond in 2018.
So the sovereign blue bond is the first of its kind. The Seychelles government launched that in 2018. So this is a $15 million bond that the government of Seychelles put out, and we got investment from 3 main investors, each contributing $5 million. And this was supported also through partial guarantor by the World Bank, and it is being facilitated through a soil fishery project. We do get 20% of that blue bond that comes to SeyCCAT. So that is a total of $3 million over a period of 6 years. That is disbursed in $500,000 disbursements every year, and that comes to SeyCCAT. The blue bonds, the way it works, it's working in tandem between both SeyCCAT and the Blue Investment Fund that is managed by the Development Bank of Seychelles. So through the grant amount that comes to SeyCCAT, we help businesses to trial out their ideas, and once they become bankable, then they can transition to the Blue Investment Fund, where they can accede to loans through the Development Bank of Seychelles.
Seychelles was associated with default because 2008, that was the pervading narrative. When we did the debt swap, for a lot of people who are involved in finance, it suddenly made everyone sit up and say, well, there's this small country, recently defaulted, but is doing something very innovative. And even as one person who eventually invested in the blue bond, they said it was game-changing because it meant that Seychelles was not sitting back waiting for climate finance. Seychelles had plans to create 30% marine protected areas and was putting the mechanism in place on how to finance it, even if not completely, but to create a flow of financing to contribute towards that. And this made everyone sit up. It really was a shock to the system in a positive way.
To support this transition, the World Bank helped the government of Seychelles issue the world's first sovereign blue bonds in 2018. As part of the debt conversion, the Seychelles Blue Grants Fund was developed as a means of supporting conservation and climate adaptation projects, including those that support the Marine Spatial Plan. SeyCCAT offers grants to impactful Seychelles-led projects that advance marine conservation and sustainable fisheries, climate change adaptation, new and existing marine protected areas, and other blue sectors. The fund invites proposals from various entities, including government institutions, non-governmental organizations, the private sector, local communities, and individuals aiming to finance projects related to sustainable development.
So every year we have $200,000 that comes from the debt swap that we use in our Blue Grants Fund program. So we would put out call for proposals every year, and we are able to support individuals, organizations, government institutions, non-governmental organizations, as well as the local communities in the projects related to ocean governance, ocean conservation that they're running on the ground.
Nous posé Blue Grants Fund qui commence en 2018. Côté qui GTP qui ban l'espèce qui PCP emmenaté. Nous ci surtout concerné par ban l'espèce qui en a ban classification IUCN. So IUCN est une organisation internationale qui donne une classification, les mêmes qui fait la liste rouge, the famous red list, et les donne une classification toutes les espèces dans le monde, son status, so si en danger, si vulnérable, si peut disparaître, and so on. Et nous avons envie de comprendre ça pour bon poisson. À cause à ce moment, il n'y a pas beaucoup de régulation qui guette l'espèce de poisson qui peut gagner mener à terre. Et nous comprenons pour dire que des gens de bon poisson qui trouvent ici, qui sont des gens dans sa classification IUCN. Alors, nous commençons à travailler avec bon PCR pour pour comprendre ça, pour commencer à se faire l'information, qui bonne poisson qui ont emmèné à terre, qui grandit, ça bonne poisson, côté de la pêche, ça bonne poisson, qui bonne saison, de la pêche, ça bonne poisson.
This project was really looking at sooty terns. So sooty terns are super abundant seabirds. They're very common in Seychelles. They have a cultural value as well as a biodiversity value. We wanted to know where do they go? Where do the juveniles go? So we have some information already. We had information by tracking adults about where they go, because you can put GPS loggers on them and find out where they went, because they come back to breed every year to the same colony usually, so you can get your data the following year. But nobody knows where juveniles go. And so these type of remote tracking can be very good for monitoring and evaluating, are these areas working? Are the birds using these? Because sooty terns are highly pelagic. The only reason they come back to land is to breed, because they need to put their egg on land. So they are out there and they're top predators. So they're eating fish and squid mostly. So yeah, I guess they are a good way for us to monitor what's happening in the sea, or to be one of the arms of monitoring what's happening in the sea. This project that was made in Seychelles, undertaken in Seychelles, definitely has international significance, has a wider significance than just the Seychelles, because sooty terns don't go, I'm a Seychelles sooty tern, so I have to stay inside Seychelles EEZ. They fly all over the Indian Ocean north of 20 degrees south. So yes, that's I guess, international waters and a lot of other countries' waters. So I think it's important information to be able to, for those countries to know, you have sooty terns, you might not know because maybe they're not breeding on your islands, but they are out there feeding, yes. So I think this is important.
Nous, dans Green Islands Foundation, nous avons prêché travail le bon projet Blue Grants Fund pour plusieurs raisons. Première raison, c'est à cause il y a un fund local. Beaucoup de fois, nous appelons bon funding avec bonne organisation internationale. Et nous mettons bon critères. Et parfois, bon critères pas nécessairement apply pour nous. So, parfois, ou pas succéder à cause, ou pas mettre certains critères. Mais ça bon critère n'est pas tout le temps applicable pour Seychelles. C'est à cause nous dans différents contextes. Nous travaillons dans différents contextes. À cause d'un fund local, il comprend ça bon contexte. So, il n'a pas besoin de mettre ça bon critère. C'est à cause il local aussi, il comprend qui bon dans quel contexte nous travaillons.
We went to SeyCCAT because I think it makes sense. What a fantastic local fund to apply to for anything marine. SeyCCAT fund a wide range of projects. So I know they fund the safe projects where maybe it's safe, it will work, but maybe the gain is small. But they were also happy to fund things that are high risk but high potential gain. I think that SeyCCAT is a very good place for Seychellois to apply for funding for any type of marine research that they think would be interesting. So I think the scope is quite big of the projects that SeyCCAT finances.
One of the key things that we always think about here within SeyCCAT is the important role that the government of Seychelles played in pioneering the first debt conversion for ocean conservation. Although at the time it seemed like something completely difficult and unattainable, I think Seychelles Government and its partners and SeyCCAT over the years, we have been able to demonstrate how successful such a mechanism can be. And with the traction that we have been receiving globally in other countries that are now embarking on similar debt conversion programs, it shows that there is a very strong push for such initiatives. And I think that is something that is worth celebrating. And as part of this documentary, we really want to be able to celebrate the effort, the commitments of all of the partners and all of the people who actually believed in the cause, even when it didn't look like it. So thank you.